Dogs are known for their loyalty, their love, their instinct to protect. But sometimes, what they sense goes far beyond human understanding. For Lisa and James Peterson, their German Shepherd, Luke, had always been the perfect family dog, gentle, obedient, and devoted. When they brought their newborn son Jacob home, Luke seemed to embrace his new role as guardian without hesitation. But then the growling started. Every night, without fail, Luke would stand outside Jacob's crib, his body tense, his deep growl rumbling through the quiet nursery. At first, they thought he was being overly protective. But soon, the growls turned to pacing, his anxious eyes pleading with them for something they couldn't understand. Had their beloved family dog turned aggressive? Was Jacob in danger? Desperate for answers, they set up a camera in the nursery. And when they reviewed the footage, their blood ran cold. Because Luke wasn't growling at Jacob. He was growling at something else. What they discovered that night would change their family forever and prove that sometimes the greatest dangers are the ones we can't see. Dog growls at child every night. When parents discover why, they're horrified. The autumn breeze whispered through the maple trees outside the Peterson family's colonial home in suburban Massachusetts, carrying with it the familiar scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. Inside, Lisa Peterson stood at her kitchen window, watching as her husband James played fetch with their German Shepherd, Luke, in the backyard. The sight should have brought her joy, as it had countless times before, but today her heart felt heavy with worry. Luke, their gentle 4-year-old German Shepherd, who had never shown an aggressive bone in his body, had been acting strange lately. It started 3 weeks ago, shortly after they brought their newborn son Jacob home from the hospital. During the day, Luke remained his usual loving self, following Lisa around the house, playing with James, and showing careful curiosity toward baby Jacob. But as night fell, something changed in their beloved pet. Every evening, like clockwork, Luke would station himself outside Jacob's nursery. At first, Lisa and James thought it was sweet, assuming their dog was being protective of the newest family member. But then the growling started. Low, rumbling growls would emanate from Luke's throat as he stared intently at Jacob's crib. The sound sent chills down Lisa's spine. It wasn't the warning growl of a protective dog, but something more urgent, almost desperate. When either Lisa or James approached, Luke would look at them with pleading eyes, then return his attention to the crib, the growling continuing. "I just don't understand it," Lisa said that evening, as James came in from the yard, Luke padding quietly behind him. "He's never behaved like this before." What if she lowered her voice? Though Luke was now drinking water from his bowl in the kitchen, what if he's becoming aggressive toward Jacob? James ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, his forehead creasing with concern. At 42, he'd waited a long time to become a father, and the safety of his son was paramount. "We should take him to Dr. Martinez," he suggested, referring to their longtime veterinarian. "Maybe there's something medical going on." Lisa nodded, absently touching the dark circles under her eyes. Between caring for a newborn and worrying about Luke's behavior, she hadn't been sleeping well. "I'll call first thing tomorrow." That night, as if to underscore their concerns, Luke's behavior was more intense than ever. The growling started as soon as they put Jacob down, and this time, Luke paced between the crib and the door, his tail low and tense. Dr. Elena Martinez's examination the next day revealed nothing unusual. Luke's physical health was perfect, and his temperament during the visit was as gentle as ever. The veteran veterinarian, who had been treating Luke since he was a puppy, sat with Lisa in her office after the examination, her dark eyes thoughtful. "Sometimes," she said, her slight Spanish accent lending warmth to her words, "dogs sense things we can't. They have instincts that go beyond our understanding. Have you noticed anything unusual in Jacob's room? Any strange smells, drafts, or sounds?" Lisa shook her head. "We had the house checked thoroughly before Jacob was born. New paint, new carpet in the nursery, air quality tests, everything." Perhaps, Dr. Martinez suggested, it would be worth consulting a dog behaviorist. "I can recommend someone excellent." The behaviorist, Sarah Wilson, came to their home the following day. She was a tall, imposing woman with short gray hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She observed Luke's interactions with the family throughout the day and into the evening. When the growling began that night, Sarah's expression grew intense. She watched as Luke alternated between staring at the crib and looking at the adults, his whole body vibrating with tension. "This isn't aggression," she declared finally. "He's trying to communicate something specific. See how he keeps checking to make sure you're paying attention? He wants you to understand something about the baby." James and Lisa exchanged worried glances. "But what?" James asked, his voice tight with concern. Sarah suggested they set up a baby monitor with video capability, positioning it to capture both Jacob and Luke's behavior. "Sometimes seeing the full picture helps us understand what's triggering the response." For 2 nights, they watched the footage carefully. Luke's growling continued, but the video showed nothing unusual. Jacob slept peacefully, occasionally stirring but nothing more. They were about to give up on the monitoring when everything changed. It was just past midnight on the 3rd night when Luke's behavior shifted from growling to frantic barking. Lisa, who had been dozing in the master bedroom, jerked awake. Through the baby monitor, she could hear Luke's desperate barks and see him jumping up, putting his front paws on the crib railing. "James," she called, already running toward the nursery. Her husband was right behind her. When they reached Jacob's room, Luke was now whining, nosing at the baby through the crib slats. Lisa's heart stopped when she reached the crib. Jacob's lips had a bluish tinge, and his chest wasn't moving. James snatched Jacob up while Lisa fumbled with her phone, calling 911. Luke watched intently as James patted Jacob's back, and suddenly, the baby gave a small gasp and began to cry. The sound was the most beautiful thing Lisa had ever heard. The emergency room doctor, Dr. Sarachin, listened carefully to their story. After a thorough examination and consultation with a pediatric specialist, Jacob was diagnosed with sleep apnea, a condition where breathing repeatedly stops and starts during sleep. It's relatively rare in infants, Dr. Chen explained, but it can be very serious if left undetected. Your dog. He likely sensed the changes in Jacob's breathing patterns. Dogs can detect subtle variations in breath and body chemistry that we can't perceive. He wasn't threatening Jacob, he was alerting you that something was wrong. Lisa sank into a chair, tears streaming down her face as the realization hit her. All this time, Luke hadn't been acting aggressive. He had been trying to protect Jacob, to warn them that their baby was in danger. The following weeks were a blur of medical appointments, sleep studies, and adjustments to Jacob's care routine. The doctors prescribed a special monitor to track Jacob's breathing during sleep, but Luke remained vigilant, his previous growling replaced by careful observation. One afternoon, about a month after Jacob's diagnosis, Lisa sat in the nursery's rocking chair, watching as Luke lay beside the crib during Jacob's nap. The German shepherd's eyes were alert but peaceful, his tail gently thumping against the floor whenever Jacob made a sound. "You knew all along, didn't you?" she whispered, reaching down to scratch behind Luke's ears. "You were trying so hard to tell us something was wrong." Luke looked up at her with those soulful brown eyes, and Lisa could have sworn she saw understanding there. He had always been more than just a pet, he was family. But now, he was also their hero, Jacob's guardian angel in fur. The story of Luke and Jacob spread through their community, then beyond. Local news picked it up, and soon they were receiving messages from around the country from people sharing similar experiences of dogs detecting medical conditions. Dr. Martinez asked permission to present the case at a veterinary conference, highlighting the importance of taking unusual animal behavior seriously. As Jacob grew stronger and the sleep apnea became managed through treatment, Luke's protective behavior evolved. He no longer needed to sound the alarm, but he maintained his gentle vigilance. He would lie beside Jacob during tummy time, tail wagging encouragingly as the baby learned to lift his head. When Jacob began to crawl, Luke would position himself strategically to guide him away from table corners and other hazards. One evening, as autumn turned to winter, Lisa found James in Jacob's nursery long after their son had fallen asleep. He was standing by the crib, one hand resting on Luke's head, watching Jacob's peaceful breathing. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't listened," James said quietly as Lisa joined them. if we dismissed his behavior as jealousy or aggression. Lisa slipped her arm around her husband's waist, leaning into him. But we did listen, eventually. And Luke never gave up trying to tell us. The German shepherd looked up at them, his expression serene. In the soft glow of the nightlight, Lisa could see the first traces of white appearing around Luke's muzzle, a reminder that their time with him wasn't endless. But his legacy would be, he had not only saved Jacob's life but had also taught them profound lessons about trust, instinct, and the deep bonds between species. As they prepared for bed that night, Lisa paused in the hallway, watching Luke settle into his usual spot outside Jacob's door. He wasn't just guarding against breathing problems anymore. He was standing watch over all of them, a silent sentinel whose love and devotion had changed their lives forever. In the years that followed, whenever Lisa would tell the story of Luke and Jacob, she would always end with the same reflection. Sometimes the most powerful messages come not in words, but in the persistent devotion of a heart that loves unconditionally. Luke had taught them to listen not just with their ears, but with their hearts, a lesson that had saved their son's life and transformed their understanding of what it truly means to be family. Even now, as Jacob grows into a healthy, active toddler, Luke remains his constant companion, their bond forged in those crucial early days. And every night, before bed, Jacob gives his furry guardian angel a hug, while Luke's tail wags contentedly, both of them secure in the knowledge that they share a connection that goes beyond ordinary understanding. A connection that once proved strong enough to bridge the gap between life and death, between species, between what we can explain and what we can only feel in our hearts. Human and canine, guardian and charge, family in every sense that matters. Their story serves as a reminder that love speaks in many languages, and sometimes the most important ones don't use words at all. The seasons turned, and with them came new milestones and memories. Jacob's second birthday party was a testament to how far they'd come. The once fragile infant now ran circles around the backyard, his laughter carrying on the spring breeze as Luke trotted faithfully beside him, matching his pace to the toddler's unsteady steps. The gray around Luke's muzzle had spread, and his gait had slowed just a touch, but his eyes remained bright and alert, especially when watching over his young charge. During the party, Lisa found herself sharing Luke's story with another mother, whose own child had recently been diagnosed with a medical condition. "It's amazing," the woman said, watching Luke gently redirect Jacob from wandering too close to the fence. "How did you know to trust him?" Lisa thought about those frightening nights of uncertainty, the fear and confusion they'd felt. "We almost didn't," she admitted. Sometimes the hardest part of listening is pushing past our own preconceptions about what we think we know. James joined them, carrying Jacob, who had finally tired himself out. Luke immediately sat at attention, his eyes tracking the sleepy toddler. "Luke taught us something profound," James added, settling into a chair with Jacob drowsing against his shoulder. "Sometimes the most powerful guardians come in unexpected forms." That evening, after the party decorations had been cleared away and Jacob was tucked into his big boy bed, a recent transition that had been made easier by Luke's constant presence, Lisa found herself reviewing old videos on her phone. She came across footage from those early days, when Luke's nighttime vigilance had seemed so mysterious and threatening. Watching it now, with the knowledge of what he had been trying to tell them, she could see the desperation in his behavior that they had initially mistaken for aggression. "We're so lucky," she whispered to James as they stood in the doorway of Jacob's room, watching their son sleep peacefully with Luke curled up on his designated bed beside the nightstand. Not just because Luke saved Jacob, but because he showed us what it means to trust our hearts even when our minds don't understand. James wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You know what Dr. Martinez told me at Jacob's last checkup? She's been using Luke's story to teach veterinary students about the importance of looking beyond the obvious when animals show unusual behavior. Apparently, there's even talk of developing better protocols for evaluating pets' reactions to medical conditions in their families." Lisa smiled, remembering the frightened parents they had been, and marveling at how that fear had transformed into something beautiful, a deeper understanding of the bonds that could exist between species, and the mysterious ways love could manifest itself. As if sensing their presence, Luke lifted his head, his tail thumping softly against his bed. In the dim glow of the nightlight, his face held the same steady devotion it had shown since the day they'd brought him home as a puppy. He was older now, moving a bit more slowly, but his commitment had never wavered. Later that night, as Lisa prepared for bed, she heard the familiar sound of Luke's paws on the hardwood floor, his nightly patrol of the house, a routine he had maintained even though Jacob's condition was well controlled now. She watched as he checked each window and door before returning to his post in Jacob's room. "Good boy," she whispered, and Luke paused to press his graying muzzle against her hand, a gesture of acknowledgement between two beings who had learned to trust each other in ways that transcended ordinary understanding. In that quiet moment, Lisa felt the full weight of their journey, from fear to understanding, from doubt to trust, from uncertainty to unshakable faith in the power of a dog's love to bridge the gap between what we can explain and what we can only feel in our hearts.